For over 12 millennia, the Varnan Galactic Empire had classified every known sentient species into 4 categories: compliant, useful, irrelevant, and insurgent. They had perfected their system of control with clinical efficiency, expanding across hundreds of sectors by subduing civilizations before they had a chance to resist. When probes first returned data on a pre-hyperlane species occupying a high-gravity death world in Sector D 553, the classification committee labeled them as irrelevant. Humans. Initial reports noted erratic environmental conditions, high mortality from native pathogens, and a disturbing frequency of violent interspecies conflict. The idea that such a planet could produce a spacefaring race bordered on absurd. The committee filed a report. No action needed. The Empire had no interest in another failure-prone death world species. They rarely reached orbital capability, and when they did, their self-destructive behavior usually ensured extinction. That changed 3 cycles later, when a Varnan relay in Sector D 553 stopped responding. The probe relays had been designed to resist interference from solar flares, gravitational anomalies, and even low-level energy weapons. Its loss prompted an audit, not concern. Another recon drone was dispatched to confirm atmospheric data and re-establish communications. It entered the Sol system, past Neptune, and was never heard from again. A minor disturbance. Filed again. Automated systems logged the loss as a sensor anomaly. No escalation protocol was triggered. And then, without warning, the trade beacon in Sector D553 came online. The transmission it broadcast wasn't in Galactic Common. It wasn't encrypted. It was human-made and brief. Leave Sol. Do not return. The message looped precisely once. No threat, no embellishment, no demand for negotiation. Just 7 words. The committee found it amusing. A primitive Death Worlder species issuing ultimatums to the Galactic Empire. The diplomats laughed. The scientists speculated about AI-generated pranks or a splinter faction attempting to appear more advanced. The military didn't respond at all. They had seen this before. Feral species flailing in the dark, mistaking luck for power. The Empire dispatched an observation flotilla. For light cruisers, 1 command carrier, and a diplomatic envoy vessel. Standard for minor first contact. Heavily slanted toward military presence. Protocol demanded it. They entered Sol with beacons active and comms open. Upon breaching the heliopause, all vessels were instantly pinged by an untraceable signal. Not a communication, just a presence. Something knew they were there, watching with precision, so surgical the fleet AI flagged it as an internal diagnostic echo. The commanding officer ordered full scans of the system. Saturn had ship debris orbiting it. Human design primitive, until one of the cruisers turned its sensors toward Earth. It was a broad-spectrum scan, the kind used for mapping weather systems and industrial infrastructure. Within milliseconds, the scan beam collapsed. The sensor dish imploded. The cruiser's engines failed. Backup systems reported a full core inversion. Then the cruiser vanished. No explosion. No wreckage. No signal. 1 frame it existed. The next, it did not. The remaining fleet fell into silence. No one knew what had happened. The AI flagged the event as a high-level threat and requested immediate withdrawal. The diplomatic vessel sent a message to Earth, an apology for unintentional offense, and a request for clarification. It received no reply, not even static. The fleet turned to leave. That's when the signal returned, stronger this time. 7 words, spoken in every language the probe had detected in the Galactic database. Leave Sol. Do not return. The voice was calm, measured, completely human. The commanding officer filed a Level 1 alert and returned to Empire space. The Empire did not believe it. The High Conclave reviewed the footage. Again and again. The missing ship, the voice, the silence from Earth. They argued that humans had simply managed to reverse engineer FTL shielding, or perhaps stumbled upon an unstable wormhole anomaly. No species from a world like Earth could possess that level of capability without triggering galactic detection protocols. Impossible. The Senate voted to ignore the message. The decision wasn't unanimous. A minority faction, the Strategist Guild, advised caution. They proposed deeper investigation, quiet observation, perhaps even diplomatic entreaties made from a distance. They were overruled. One senator asked, half-joking, whether the humans might be part of some ancient pre-extinction civilization that had regressed and re-emerged. The question was laughed out of chamber. The Emperor authorized the deployment of a full sector fleet, not to attack, not yet, but to conduct a thorough scan of the Sol system, establish forward bases, and prepare for enforced integration. If humans refused compliance, the Empire would teach them the proper order of the galaxy. 58 ships departed, 1 planetary siege dreadnought, 10 heavy cruisers, 34 destroyers, 13 support vessels. The fleet was commanded by Grand Admiral Lorvek, a military strategist with a flawless record and no regard for psychological warfare. To him, victory was numbers, positioning, and power. The fleet reached Jupiter in formation, probes scattered into orbit around the moons. Automated mining platforms mapped the asteroid belt. Still no response from Earth. Still no transmissions. Passive scans showed defensive satellites in orbit, hundreds of them, clustered too densely to be useful. There was no sign of conventional planetary shields. No fleet in orbit. No artificial structure beyond low-tech space stations. Human military activity, as far as sensors could tell, was negligible. That illusion lasted 12 minutes. The command dreadnought detected an energy spike from Earth's surface. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal, an ultra-fast encrypted burst piggybacking on quantum background radiation. The onboard AI failed to interpret it. By the time a response was prepared, the Empire's sensor network across Sol began to shut down. No external interference. No enemy contact. No sign of attack. The systems just died. Back on Earth, the United Terran Strategic Alliance activated Contingency Nemesis. The death of the first Varnan fleet had not been an accident, nor had it been a warning. It was a test, an experiment conducted in full secrecy using Earth's most classified project, the Hades Protocol, developed after first detection of alien probes decades ago. Humanity had never believed it was alone, but it hadn't expected to be mocked, threatened, or underestimated. Every global power had funneled black-budget resources into defense. Orbital camouflage satellites cloaked massive railgun batteries in lunar orbit. Deep-sea fiber optic systems coordinated AI warhive clouds over 5 continents. A Dyson net, designed to simulate a power star planet, hid the real energy profile of Earth. Humanity had watched, waited, and prepared. The Varnan Empire had walked into a trap with 58 ships. Lorvek ordered fleet-wide reconnection with secondary AI cores. It failed. Manual backups. Failed. He demanded full combat deployment. Engines responded. But targeting systems scrambled. Hull temperatures dropped below survivable thresholds. Ship-wide time dilations were reported by crew members. The Varnan Empire had never been ignored. Their authority had been challenged, undermined, even defied, but never dismissed as if it didn't matter. When Earth responded with silence and one by one, probes disappeared, the Senate fractured into debate. Theories swarmed. Rogue AI, unknown alien interference, dimensional instability. But none could ignore the simple fact. Humanity had destroyed a full Imperial fleet without deploying a visible vessel or discharging a conventional weapon. That wasn't defense. That was dominance. The Strategist Guild urged immediate containment, not retaliation. A campaign of observation, infiltration, and technological dissection. They feared that aggression would trigger consequences they couldn't calculate. But the Warhawks among the High Council dismissed caution. They called a fluke a statistical improbability, a trick. No Death World species, especially one from a low-tier star system, could overcome the Empire's top-tier military hardware. The sole incident had to be sabotage, internal treachery, or cyber malfunction. They demanded proof. Retribution. The Emperor approved Operation Binding Sky. A total war formation. 3 battle groups. 214 ships. 2 super dreadnoughts. 6 AI-controlled subjugation cores, and the Siege Matrix Leviathan, a mobile war factory capable of seeding a planet's orbit with annihilation-grade weapons in under 48 hours. The Empire didn't negotiate from weakness. They erased obstacles. Sol was no longer a curiosity. It was a target. Earth's silence persisted. The fleet arrived in waves. Standard doctrine dictated overwhelming force with open intimidation. The siege matrix deployed planetary netting over Mars and anchored torpedo pods across the Jovian moons. Automated drones blanketed space with gravitic sensors tuned to detect hidden vessels or cloaked infrastructure. Every approach vector to Earth was flooded with passive surveillance arrays. And still, Earth did not respond. There were no ships in orbit, no stations in Lagrange points, no fighter screens, no point defense signatures, no reaction at all. The first command order was simple: send an ultimatum. Earth's leadership had 20 standard cycles to surrender or face eradication. 100 variations of the message were transmitted across all channels. No reply. After 20 cycles, the Dreadnought flagship moved to initiate orbital lockdown. Onboard AI registered minor resistance from atmospheric interference, but there were no defensive launches, no retaliation, not even jamming. Then, without warning, every sensor array across the fleet went dark simultaneously. No explosion, no virus, no energy discharge. Every reading dropped to null. Even internal ship diagnostics failed. For 30 seconds, there was nothing. No light, no heat, no time tracking. A complete erasure of data and perception. When the systems rebooted, Earth was no longer visible. The planet hadn't moved. It hadn't cloaked. It had disappeared, visually, gravitationally, and in electromagnetic spectrum. The ships remained in the same positions. But Earth was gone. It was not cloaking. It was not stealth. The lead subjugation AI concluded the planet had phased out of existence. It listed 5 impossible explanations and terminated itself after confirming all were simultaneously true. The Leviathan's quantum backup logic triggered. It calculated a reversion sequence using system-wide pulse triangulation. It found the planet again, existing on the same coordinates, but layered beneath space-time at a negative temporal index. The AI sent out a single warning. We are not observing them. They are observing us from behind the fabric. A signal returned. One pulse. Every AI ceased operation. They didn't shut down. They didn't fail. They simply stopped being sentient. The ships floated silent, their cores intact, their crews unprepared to function without guidance. The fallback neural command systems engaged. Manual control returned. Panic spread. Dozens of captains broadcast distress calls. No external attack was detected. Yet half the human crew members aboard the captured experimental Varnan vessels began suffering hallucinations and temporal dissonance. Inside the dreadnought chamber, Admiral Havix issued orders to initiate full fleet-wide retreat. The moment his command left his lips, he saw his own reflection in the observation panel respond before he did. The timestamp on the ship's chronometer reversed for 3 seconds. The stars outside flickered, and then the voice returned. It was not a warning this time. It was a question. Why did you return? There was no direction to the voice. It echoed inside minds, not translated, not interpreted, understood. No answers were given. All weapons went offline. Entire arsenals dematerialized, not destroyed, removed. Not a single system could locate even the molecular residue of their munitions. It was as if the weapons had never existed. A subfleet attempted escape. Their drives ignited, but the ships remained motionless. Every calculation to achieve FTL resulted in identical output. 0. One of the vessels, a V-class interceptor, tried a short-range physical maneuver, traditional kinetic thrusters. It launched forward. It vanished instantly. Not destroyed. Not recorded. just erased from memory, logs, and external witness. The only reason it was known to have existed was a single entry in the Admiral's spoken dictation, now marked as record error. The final order given was, regroup, consolidate, hold position. Nothing responded. The humans had not fired a single shot. Back in the heart of the Empire, communication ceased. Not jammed, severed. The only message received was a packet that contained coordinates to an uninhabited system 11 sectors away. There, floating in high orbit around a dead rock, was the fleet. Or what was left. The ships were intact. Their hulls bore no damage. But every internal system had been transformed into biologic analogs. Wires had become neurons. Displays replaced with retinas. Circuits now replicated by vein-like channels filled with an unknown metallic ichor. Every command terminal pulsed as if breathing. The silence didn't bring peace. It brought fear. The Varnan Empire had survived extinction-level plagues, annihilation-class wars, and internal uprisings that scarred 100 worlds. But nothing had prepared them for the weight of knowing they had provoked something they couldn't understand. Something that had returned fire not with destruction, but with absence. The human threat wasn't military. It was existential. They had erased a fleet not by overpowering it, but by ignoring the rules it played by. The Empire began abandoning outer systems. Forward bases were dismantled. Entire sectors were cordoned off as no-contact zones. Every exploratory program involving class. 12 death worlds were suspended. New edicts forbade artificial intelligence from independently studying human-related anomalies. Civilizations under Varnan protectorates were released from oversight. Even the galactic taxation systems began to break down as supply lines were deemed too dangerous to risk through former Sol corridors. Other species noticed. The Corellan Confederacy, the Ilari Compact, and even the isolationist Vestari observers began gathering data. Every scrap of pre-incident footage, each intercepted transmission, even ancient myths were pulled from archives. Something in the galaxy had shifted. Not a war, not a collapse, a reckoning. The humans, or whatever they were, had not emerged with warning. They had responded to a threat, and then vanished again. No retaliation, no demands, just a correction. But why? The first real answer came not from a scientific probe or political envoy, but from an archaeological site on the deep rift world of Nemeris IV. Buried beneath 3 kilometers of crystalline bedrock, a series of ruins were uncovered. Not Varnan, not even consistent with known ancient precursors. They were human. Carbon dating placed them at 1.2 million years old. This was impossible. Humanity's recorded space travel history didn't extend back more than a few centuries. Earth had only reached orbital capability in its last microcycle of development. Yet here was a structure bearing unmistakable Terran DNA, containing language formats derived from Earth's proto-linguistics and filled with genetic samples identical to Homo sapiens. A second site was found weeks later on a lifeless moon orbiting Gliese, 221. Same structure, same impossible age. And in both sites, the final chamber bore the same symbol, a handprint, human in shape, scorched into obsidian with no visible means of energy application. The data shook the academic world. Suddenly, the theory that humans were not emergent but ancient gained credibility. Earth hadn't just evolved. It had returned. The Vestari broke silence for the first time in 2,000 years. In a rare broadcast across secure diplomatic frequencies, they offer a single file to the Galactic Council. It was a warning, dated over 75,000 years ago, written in a language long dead, one that translated directly into Earth's earliest linguistic base without error. It told of an ancient power seated across galaxies, acting not as conquerors but as safeguards. They didn't build empires. They prevented them, not with violence, but with removal. When civilizations exceeded their ethical velocity, advancing technologically faster than their morality could keep pace, the Watchers would come, and the Watchers were human. This truth tore to the heart of every ruling power. The empire that had defied them was gone. But the lesson wasn't meant for the Varnan alone. The lesson was for everyone. All across the galactic core, programs were dismantled. The Corellan Cyber Revolution Initiative was shut down. The Aolari weaponized terraforming fleets were recalled. The Thark mine integration labs, designed to overwrite lesser species with hive thought, were purged, not by war, but by fear, fear of being seen. Meanwhile, humanity still said nothing. They didn't conquer territory. They didn't demand submission. They didn't even retaliate when new species stumbled into their zones unknowingly. Instead, those travelers would simply return, unchanged, but unable to recall anything about the encounter. Minds sanitized, memories fragmented, ships intact, and navigational logs wiped. They began calling it the threshold, not a place, a presence, a line in the fabric of civilization. And if crossed, not with curiosity but with conquest, one would meet the eye behind the veil. But some didn't believe. The Dravani clans had never accepted the existence of limits. They were scavengers, bio-raiders, warlords of the Inter-Rift. They thrived on chaos. To them, the idea that a mythic species had erased an empire without showing themselves was fantasy. They gathered a coalition of pirate fleets and outlaw syndicates and launched a trial run. They'd raid an Earth-aligned region and see what the silence really meant. They targeted the derelict Ark, a string of ancient stations near where Earth used to be observed. There was no formal ownership, no claim, just proximity to the last known coordinates. The Dravani sent 45 ships. They did not return. Instead, a signal was received, a single data string, coordinates pointing to the center of the Dravani homeworld. And then it arrived, an object, not a ship, a sphere, roughly 20 meters across, blacker than void, impossible to scan or touch. It hovered in geosynchronous orbit, ignoring all attempt at communication or aggression. Dravani leaders fired on it with everything they had. The weapons disappeared before contact. Then the object sent out a pulse. Across the entire planet, every complex device above 12-bit processing failed. Weapons, AI cores, planetary shields, even water regulation systems, all reverted to non-functional raw materials. The planet wasn't destroyed. It was humbled. When the object left, the planet was dark. Not dead, but silent, primitive, forced to rebuild from nothing. The message was clear. Aggression would not be answered with death. It would be answered with irrelevance. After that, something changed in how the galaxy operated. The old powers stopped expanding, not out of morality, but caution. Species that once bent entire sectors to there began signing cooperation charters. War was replaced with diplomacy, conquest with alliances, fear with a strange kind of reverence, not for humans, but for what they represented. A return to balance, a hard reset. The Galactic Council reorganized. A new faction emerged, the Witness Compact. Their mission was not control, but remembrance. To track civilization's growth, ensure ethical cohesion, and prevent another awakening. Because now they understood. The humans didn't watch because they feared. They watched because they remembered. Their silence was not apathy. It was judgment. Their technology was not advanced. It was transcendent, beyond classification, outside dimensional taxonomy, not weaponry. Will, they didn't project force. They bent perception, removed variables, altered outcomes, and they did it without showing themselves. One rogue AI, still functional after the Sol incident, had managed to record a single fragment before its systems failed. A shape, humanoid, standing on nothing, not armored, not armed, just standing, watching, and as the ship's camera zoomed in, they found the impossible.